This week, we welcome Craig Davies, Chief Information Security Officer at Gathid, to discuss the 5 crucial cyber questions to ask before finalizing a merger or acquisition. In the Leadership and Communication segment, how to find the right CISO, new security leadership style needed for stressed workers, combating human error, how to safeguard your business against costly data breaches, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Your customers' and employees' identities are your responsibility to keep safe. But who is helping you stay safe from identity-based threats? Identity is the key to getting security right. And with the right identity partner, so much more is possible for your business than you thought. From strengthening cybersecurity to increasing revenue to reducing inefficiencies and costs, Okta unlocks growth and new possibilities for its customers. Go to securityweekly.com/Okta to learn more about Okta and the company's commitment to leading the fight against identity attacks. ThreatLocker implements a least privileged approach to cybersecurity, blocking every executable unless specifically authorized by your team. This methodology mitigates ransomware, supply chain attacks, and zero-day exploits, and ensures 24/7, 365 protection for your organization. To learn more about how ThreatLocker can help prevent known and unknown threats in your digital environment, safeguard your data and operations from threat actors, and align your organization with respected compliance frameworks, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 371, recorded November 4th, 2024. I am your host, Matt Alderman. Joining me for this interview segment today are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. All of our teams suffered this weekend, buddy.
Week 9 has been horrible of the NFL. Pats took an L, Browns took an L, Cowboys the loss, Ravens
Broncos, all of them.
It was crazy. Listen, if you were to talk to me back in the heyday of, the glory days of the New England Patriots, never in my life would I think that the Lions would be topping off the NFC right now. And the Patriots would be at the bottom of the barrel. Worst in the league. What is it? Patriots, Saints, and Panthers. All tied for the worst.
Yeah, they're all struggling. Also joining me, Mr. Ben Carr. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Matt. How you doing today? Great to be back with you after a little bit of time in Orlando, doing some work, doing some fun stuff with the family. Good to be back.
Nice. Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you.
Craig Davies is Chief Information Security Officer and Executive Director at Gathid. He has spent more than 25 years in cybersecurity, working in a number of fields, including infrastructure operations, security architecture and software, web development, and operations. Craig was previously head of security at Atlassian before and during their IPO, and he began his career in banking. Craig, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Well, good morning to Jason, Ben, and you, Matt.
Yes, you are down under.
I don't know if I'm supposed to give the sport update from the weekend here in Australia, but we did beat Pakistan yesterday in the one-day cricket. Does that count?
Yes, it does, actually. I mean, the only 2 sports I think you have in Australia are cricket and what you call football. We call it soccer. But outside of that, what else you got, buddy?
Rugby,
Let me see. We've got the Aussie rules, the Australian rules, of which women's competition's underway. We've just finished the main football season of Australian rules and rugby league. The rugby union team, the Wallabies, is currently on their way to the UK to play a Grand Slam series in the UK. What else have we been doing? I don't know. It's Australia. We've got sport going on all the time. I'm sure there'll be something on. But yes, AFLW is the big thing at the moment. Plus, cricket season's just starting up with the Australian team. Plus, soccer is just starting up the summer season because we play here in summer. For it, and every other sport. We've got the NBL going on, the basketball league's going quite strong at the moment. And
I heard your Olympic breakdancing team is doing really well too, right? Olympic breakdancing?
Oh, that was harsh. That was harsh, Jason. Wow.
I thought you were kind to me this morning, but don't mention the war. It's pretty harsh. The number of ray gun Halloween costumes I have seen, I think, is fairly epic and a pretty good representation of what the world thinks.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It's good to see that Australia's done all these great things in the world, and we have one breakdancer.
That was your export. That was your export, yeah.
Just fun. But we're not here to talk about breakdancing. We're here to talk about mergers and acquisitions. When you submitted your guest submission, I linked to I'm going to link it in the notes, your Forbes article on the 5 crucial questions to ask. But before we get into the questions, like, why is it important to think about cybersecurity prior to finalizing a merger and acquisition?
Well, look, you can think about the range of reasons that, cybersecurity is usually the last thing thought about in a merger and acquisition. And I think back to my many times being involved in M&A work, and to this day, I know that the Swedish word for inbox is inkorgen, from finding that out when I turned up to do the integration and find out that everything's in Swedish. And I think what happens for it is everyone gets kind of hung up on the excitement of a merger acquisition play, and then it's kind of kicked over the fence to the operations team to deliver a successful outcome. And what I've found in my experience is that's when you start to find all the nice little surprises that someone's left for you, which can have an impact onto the value of the organization that's just been acquired. Many companies, when they're preparing for an M&A work, let's face it, we've all been through it. So spending in non-critical items will drop. Maybe the PC fleet ages out, maybe the server fleet ages out, maybe they've removed some roles to save money. You don't know the circumstances surrounding it, but many, many times M&As come in and you inherit a lot of problems. And it's always funny because companies talk about, we're going to make these huge savings by combining the back end. Meantime, the entire security and IT operations team are, pulling out their hair or drinking to excess because of what they're inheriting, let alone what they've got to try and fix from there. And I think in my experience, some of the ones that I've seen or been a part of, these things have a fundamental impact on the value of the organization that's been acquired, but it hasn't been seen in the M&A work.
Right.
But sorry, man, I was going to say, even in organizations, they've been through it and they've seen the impact of that. Like, they don't seem to learn from their mistakes. It seems to be an ongoing fallacy that they think, it's not important to go over, when the last one we did, the valuation should have been impacted, right, by the state. So it does seem strange to me that that's not something that once you've been through it once or twice, you account for.
I think it's changing a little bit now, but it's probably not so much changing because of M&A. I think it's changing because of the understanding that there could be cybersecurity or IT operations issues, right? Because we've had highly publicized breaches and things like that, and I think that influences it. But I've yet to see a deal adjusted because of what they're acquiring. But I think there's a bit of an understanding around it as well. I've kind of provided consulting advice into some of these things, and you look at a couple of these deals and you're kind of like, oh, guys, I'm not so sure everything's quite as per the brochure here.
Yeah, I think Verizon got, hold on one second, because I think Verizon did get a little deal break after the Yahoo breach, I think, right? It's a little bit.
I mean, my question is, how many organizations that are going through the M&A process are actually proactively doing a cyber risk assessment? So many organizations that I've seen are actually doing it after the acquisition has already happened or after the mergers. Many times the IT teams don't even have visibility into what the other systems are. So from your experience, how many organizations are actually doing this proactively?
Well, hence my understanding that the Swedish word for inbox is inkorgen. By turning up to do an integration and going, that's not English, and being told it's Microsoft, it's an English company.
But I mean, is it 0? Is it 10%? What are you seeing out there?
Look, there's very little of it done. There is some work being done, but it's very minor. I don't think it also depends on the maturity of the acquiring company as well. So if they don't have the robust architecture around how they're going to do these M&A work, because I think M&A deals fall into two things. You have the company who does them regularly, so they will have some degree of a cookbook to kind of do stuff. And they might have a bit of a mention about cyber. Usually after the event, contact the security team and go, oh, we bought a thing. And then you have the companies that don't do it very often. They're being advised by external parties. It could be a really big deal. It could be a really small deal. But the fact is, it's not on their mind. It's not on their thinking. What they're trying to figure out is, how much am I paying to do this? And which people are we keeping, and which sites, which, how are we going to integrate? And the technology is kind of kicked over the fence to the team going, yeah, just figure it out. Just figure it out.
That's even worse though, right? Like if it's a third party, they're calling it for advisement, right? Like you would think that would certainly be part of their playbook, right? Like there's a bunch of other parts of the org that you evaluate for how it affects the deal size. But yeah, cyber never comes up.
Well, you can always pull out your 29-page Excel questionnaire and get that answered. And everyone knows how wonderful Excel is as a security analysis tool. So, you think about that. I've worked with clients who have a vision as to what they're going to do, and they'll get on top of it. But, I've worked with clients who, in the case of, our platform, we've got a client who's done an M&A, and they've used it because their number one battle they're trying to face is identity, who's who in the zoo. So that's what they've used the platform for. But the question doesn't get asked. So then that's the role. Let's assume, right? Let's live in a fantasy world that maybe you got a heads up that it was going to happen. Remember, sometimes these deals are related to public industry, publicly listed companies. So you may not know. You may not be allowed to know. You mightn't be in the tent for these deals. So, kind of kicks it. The first time you might read about it is in the financial press, where your CEO announces that they've bought XYZ Corp, and then you're like, well, that's going to leave a mark. I better try and find out something about that. So, the first things you've got to try and do is bring in, they talk a lot, one of the most common complaints that cybersecurity people, you get a little bit is, I love it when people say to me, the business doesn't understand. And I kind of inclined to ask, I'm sorry, I thought you worked for the company. I didn't realize you were a consultant. So it's your job to mature that conversation. And these events can be a really great opportunity to raise your maturity in the organization and your standing, perception of it, whatever, by working through, a couple of simple things to get in front of the teams and see if you can progress it, remembering that the opportunity that you're going to offer, the value you're going to offer is, I can make this happen cheaper than you think, or perhaps more expensive than you think, because I'm going to find out stuff that you really should have known beforehand.
Right.
You look into their directory system, there's 3,000 employees and there's 27,000 employees in the directory, and you go, well, yeah, we might have a bit of a problem there. You might
have a little identity sprawl.
We've got a client we're working with at the moment, and I've worked with this myself, 17 different Active Directories because of a history of acquisitions that they're trying to clean up. 4 different email systems. I've been through it myself with acquisitions, where if you don't get on top of it quickly, I love it when we say we're going to integrate all these platforms. 5 years later, they're still figuring out how to integrate platforms. And it can be as simple as they never get email integrated, or they never get messaging integrated. 5 different ERP systems. Perhaps they're all SAP or Oracle or anything like that, which means that there's 5 different, interpretations of that thing. So the more that you can be on top of, probably the first thing I always look at, of course, is identity. Who's who in the zoo, and who's connected to what, who can approve what, and be prepared for, well, that is disappointing when you find something you go, And just think about it nowadays. We were talking about this. We had a client who had an AS400 they had to integrate into their identity view. I'm pretty sure most of the people I work with at Gathid weren't born when AS400s were still a thing. So that was quite a challenge. And, usually there is still in a cupboard somewhere, or buried behind a brick wall, or in a colo data center. And everybody goes, what does that do? You find it runs, a key manufacturing system or something. So I think from there, and also just to close on this point, in Australia, there's increased emphasis for directors having a better understanding of cybersecurity. There's still no penalties or whatever, but the Australian government has put a lot of investment into at least trying to raise that maturity. So these are becoming more visible, and I think that's really important because of the liabilities that the business is absorbing through the M&A process. And what a great time to be popping somebody as well. Great time for phishing scams. Hey, this is your new payroll details. This is your new, insert thing here.
Yeah, we try to do the same thing here in the States. We're waiting for it to actually make an impact.
I mean, we just went through a lot, right? I mean, at the end of the day, M&A is high risk out of the gate. We know this. But we just talked about the majority of organizations are doing it reactively versus proactively after the fact, right? After the deal is done. But even if it's done proactively, we just talked about how complicated it could be. The technical debt, the sprawl, the identity sprawl, very, very complicated. Craig, have you ever seen, and this is just something that popped in my head, for the acquiring company, is there insurance coverage that could help with any type of risk that this acquired company is bringing to your organization? Can they use that as a tool to help mitigate any type of risk? Is that even a thought to have some type of liability insurance during an M&A activity?
Look, it's funny you bring that up. We just went through the insurance renewal cycle for our cyber insurance and business insurances and everything like that. And the clauses that were in the policy this time compared to years gone by were quite confronting and interesting. We're a SaaS vendor. We deal with identity. For us, you would expect it would be a challenge. The short answer is probably. There's probably an insurance you can buy because let's face it, you can pretty well insure anything. The question is, you can't offset that risk by just buying an insurance policy. You can't go, oh, it's okay, I bought insurance. Because what's the first thing the insurance company is going to go is, okay, so what's your duty of care? What's your due diligence? How did you do it? Mm-hmm. And if you go, oh, we turned up and got the admin login, we knew that we had 2,000 employees and 27,000 people in the directory. What's going to... No insurance company is going to cover you for that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No. Well, they might cover you. They're not going to pay you.
Correct.
If you've got a problem. So it still breaks down to how, and I talk about what I mean by this. One of the really important things, again, is you've got a technical problem you need to solve. Okay, let's just accept that. Okay, we can talk about, you've got to do this with the directory, you've got to do this with email. Everyone knows all that stuff, right? What I'm talking about here is how it's actually a wonderful opportunity to mature the conversation inside the organization around what you're going to do. Perhaps the team you're acquiring, God forbid, are actually really better at cybersecurity than your team ever has been. Ooh. Let's assume. So it opens up these opportunities for you to mature the conversation in the organization. You can take the conversation away from cyber into business efficiency. You can take the conversation away from phishing to robust processes. You can take it, there's all these things. And the other thing is, while any integration, no matter how well organized both sides are, is going to have an oh no second, where you're just going to go, oh, so you've got to have a plan to be ready for that. So it's a really good time to have your disaster plans tested, your BCP plans tested, even your communication plans tested around that. Because again, you're also dealing with people, because so many people in an M&A, they might hear all the stories from the top about, we care for people and all that sort of stuff. But at that day-to-day level, if you're the acquiring company, whether you like it or not, you've got a opportunity to present that value proposition to the team that's joining you as well. So it becomes a bigger issue than just, we've got to get the cyber stuff right. That's table stakes nowadays.
No,
right?
No,
it
agreed.
becomes how do you progress the conversation?
There was a method to my madness with the question. And if the majority of organizations are punting a cybersecurity risk assessment until after the deal is done, my question is why? Do they think insurance is going to cover them? Do they think why are these teams punting? And I want to be able to demystify that if you're sitting in front of a set of leaders saying, listen, cyber insurance isn't going to cover your butt if something happens after this acquisition.
Well, there's an ongoing conversation about how the value of cyber insurance and where it fits, and there are great policies around. Let's not degrade too much the insurance industry. However, what we've got to balance it against is that you can't sell your risk off. You can't go and buy it. It's a valid part of the conversation, but you still got to have a handle on what you're going to do. And it comes back to the first point I was talking about, is that perhaps the company, if they're listed entities or it's commercially sensitive, all those reasons, you may not have been pulled into the room, which is a separate conversation about where you're seen in the organization. But the fact is, you're there now. You can sit in the corner and cry about it and go, you should have told me these things. Or you can have a couple of simple steps to go, right, this is what we're doing next. Let's get on with it. No one's really interested in what they should have done. What they want to know is, okay, so, what's next? What do we need to do next? And that is your opportunity to present a professional, calm response to, okay, these are the things you're going to do. And, you need to be clear in your own mind, what are the things I need to do, and get everything out on the table. Company maturity will only improve for the next time if this time, like it's such a great opportunity to present, this is how we should handle it, whereas if you do a Kermit, what Kermiting is, where you run around with your hands in the air, and go, this is terrible. Trust me, they're still not going to tell you next time round, because it's just it's too hard. We just want the deal done, buddy. Just find a way. It's just email. It's just, as you know, anybody who's worked in IT for 30 plus years, what's your number one skill? Can you make my printer work? So, maybe that's the biggest challenge you would ever have in the whole day is, the printers aren't compatible.
So, Craig, as we've been going through this conversation, I want to hit the 5 kind of crucial questions. We've covered a lot of them already during this conversation, but I do want to highlight them. What is the target company's cybersecurity posture? Why is that so important?
Well, you want to know if how they've approached it is in line with your organization's philosophy. As we were discussing before, they may have a really mature philosophy that you can learn from. Okay, let's assume that happens. All right, never does. But you want to understand, what they do right now. How do they measure things? How do they do identity and access management? How do they life cycle people? Patching, updating, disaster recovery. You want to have a really good handle on what you're inheriting or looking to integrate before you get started, particularly around disaster recovery, business continuity planning, because you want to be assured that as you're doing integration work, if you need to roll back or if you've got a patch or whatever, that there's a plan if something should not work the way you think it's going to work. I think it's really important. The other thing you want to know, of course, is, are you sitting on a time bomb? Are you inheriting a potential breach issue? Perhaps they've already been breached and don't know, and you want to be on top of it rather than, getting the Thursday morning surprise of, well, as we know, all good security incidents happen at 4:00 on a Friday afternoon. So you want to be on top of that before it kind of hits you in the face with those things. So, and perhaps if you were lucky enough to be involved early, it can go into the commercial conversations as well around the value of the entity that you're acquiring, particularly if the risk of what you're acquiring is really, really high. If you can see you are inheriting a challenging opportunity to integrate into your own world.
Yep. We talked a lot about integrating systems. What are some of the big gotchas on the integration side? I mean, it's probably just planning more than anything else, isn't it? Like, you need to know the system so you know how to plan to get them integrated.
Look, I think there's a couple of things you want to do. Obviously, even now I talk a lot about, people, systems, planning. The number one thing for me, obviously, with Gathid, is identity. And identity across the board is the number one kind of attack vector. It's the number one weakness in organizations. So you want to have a really good view as to how identity is managed in that organization and where the identities are. You'd want to have a representation of how their business processes are supported by the underlying technology. Do they use a collaboration platform? Do they just do everything in email? Is there gaps in their process? Maybe a business email compromise, hi, it's Barry, the CEO. Don't tell anyone, I need you to do an urgent job for me. That kind of send me money email. Do their business processes protect them against that, or is it viable? You want to have metrics around, what your migration plan looks like, what success looks like. And you also want to have the ability to manage people's expectations around what this acquisition is going to look like. Because as we spoke earlier, maybe their systems have been so degraded or run down or not updated that the people could be quite excited that they're going to get access to something new. So you need to kind of manage, what you're going to integrate from them. We can go down to the technical layer. You want to see the data flows across the organization. You want to see their architecture. You want to see how they've designed their security platform. Who gets the alerts? Does anyone get alerts? Who are the third parties involved? What have they outsourced? Do they care?
Yeah.
You think about all those times where companies have had breaches and the alerts were going off, but like someone muted them because they were always going off. You all know those stories. So I think that's there. And then your integration plan is always going to be complex. Never, ever think this can't be that hard, because trust me, it's that hard. There's always someone in the organization who uses some particular system or way that you never thought it could be used. And you go, well, that's interesting.
Well, and it relates to question number 4, which is about disruptions during the integration, right? If you don't have good plans and a good understanding of those systems, you're not going to be prepared if something goes wrong, which you just said it usually goes wrong.
Yeah, one of the areas that I like to spend a lot of time on, and I've done this in organizations as well, is, those tabletop exercises around, okay, so if this goes bang, what do we do from there? And I run these as well for outside organizations. I have a lot of fun with them. I have a lot of scenarios that may or may not be true, allegedly. I think it was we do the thing. And you want to have those exercises, particularly if you're doing combined teams, so everyone's on the same page around how we're going to do this work. You want to have the methodology and the thinking around the dry run. If we were to do this, if this was to break, if this part was to fail, if we were to find this problem as we're going along, what's the next thing we do? What's our disaster recovery plan? If we find something really bad, what's our communications plan? If we find something really, really bad, what's our public communications plan? And spending a little bit of time to really ensure that you had to think about these vulnerabilities and these potential disruptions, but more importantly, you've got the thinking of a plan about something that it could be the infamous, no one's ever seen that before, right? Which, of course, happens to all of us all the time. So you want to have that thinking and that maturity in your organization, in your security team or your IT operations team, to go, this is really weird. We need to stop. And we need to enact, this plan now. And it could be as simple as we need to get in a war room and figure out what we've just acquired. It's something very bad from there. And of course, communication is number one key. You want to have a really robust communications protocol, both up and down and across the organization. So people are aware what's going on to the level that is necessary for them to know to do their jobs. So we can minimize communication errors. So we can minimize fear or FUD. Even in mergers, FUD's quite common. And present that unified face across the organization around, this is what we're doing. This thing's really easy, or this thing's really hard. And we think these things could be a problem for us as we're going along.
Yep. You said get all employees on the same page, which is your question number 3. But I think you meant it more from kind of the human element. How much does culture play into M&A? The security culture of both organizations.
In my experience, I think it's huge. Perhaps you're going into an organization where maybe the current security team, if they had one, let's assume that they had one, maybe wasn't on everyone's Christmas card list. And you've got to rebuild trust in that function. Maybe you're inheriting a Dr. No, which I believe happens in cybersecurity. I'm quite shocked to hear those things. Or maybe they've got a culture where they don't care. It's like they've never had the conversation internally, or their perception of risk is totally different to yours. It happens. So then you've got to be able to adjust your messaging to build understanding of why you feel the way you do. And perhaps it's also an opportunity for you. Maybe they do things that you think are really odd, but if you have a bit of think about it, you can go, hey, that's quite good. I think one of the best examples, I've been asked about this a lot lately, phishing tests, right? I hate them. I think I hate them, absolutely hate them. Because in 9 out of 10 organizations I talk to, they're attached to a penalty structure. Mm-hmm. Okay? If you're going to do any testing or whatever for people, you need people to feel supported, reassured, and you need to build on it as an opportunity for a conversation from there. That's the kind of programs I build. Look, it's okay to validate your systems, but I wrote another article about blast radius. I always describe it as well. Like if you've got a system that's so weak that one person clicking on a link can take it out, trust me, the problem's not the person. So, these are the opportunities to think about all those things and then how you do that. But, many organizations regretfully still, their cybersecurity posture is still stuck in the block everything, say no. If you fail a phishing test, you get a written warning, like all this kind of stuff. Whereas we need to be continuing to build, the airbag of the organization. I do talk about a lot with cars. You think about it with your car. My car, I don't know, it's got 57 airbags and all these controls and does all these things because it knows at some point I'm going to make a very, very big mistake. And bad things will happen. Whereas many organizations, if you get an email and you click on it and it can corrupt your entire environment, and you go, yeah, I don't think the problem was with Susan in marketing clicking on that link. It was the blast radius couldn't be contained.
Yeah.
We've still got a long way to go to develop those kind of airbags. But, I quite enjoy it. Even now in our current organization, we get stuff flowing through. We've got all the security controls and everything in place. Stuff still gets through. Think about it as defenders. We've got to defend against all these things. Attackers only need to get it right once. We've got to get it right continually. So the team, particularly when it's an email from the CEO or myself, saying, send me money, they all share it around and it's a big laugh. And then we go back into the systems and try and figure out how it got in.
And your last one, post-merger plan. I mean, obviously you've got to do some consolidation, simplification of systems, right? I mean, these are important conversations to know in advance because you need to know, I think, what budget you're going to need to actually make all those integrations work.
Well, I think also in the world now of certification and, many organizations are doing, ISO, or they could be impacted by SOC 2 or GDPR. They're probably the three big ones when I think about it. But in the other financial markets, it could be SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, insert standard here, the one they've got to meet. So if you don't have a clear plan as to how you're going to do it, you're not going to get it done. You're just going to be sitting there still down the road going, look, we can't achieve SOC 2 because of, this problem. We haven't got on top of it. We've affected our ISO 27001 certification because of this. So you want to take the opportunity to improve and perhaps simplify your frameworks, look at your controls, see what you need to do, look at what controls you're inheriting, where they're aligned, where they fit into your control framework, and then be able to report on that. And I think, again, coming back to opportunities for improvement. And I don't know, I still think in the majority of organizations, the number one problem they still haven't solved is identity and access management. And trust me, it's not as simple as just going out and buying IAM tool that does, workflow. You've got to go back to your process central kind of stuff and have an overall view as to how your organization fits, which is the philosophy that we've taken. But without that identity view, the rest starts becoming quite pointless because, and I'm talking identity down to as simple as who's got access to the facilities. How many times do you find that, someone, they've never had a control of the access cards or Or there's one organisation I
keys.
worked with recently, they had keys, and then no one knew who had the keys to a facility. So massive amount of changing locks to redo, all these things because it doesn't get recorded. Like we gave a key to Barry. Barry's a good guy.
Yes. Jason, Ben, I wanted to make sure we got through the 5. Any additional questions for Craig?
I mean, just from my perspective, what are some little golden nuggets that you can leave behind for our listeners who are cybersecurity leaders who have to navigate the future of M&A deals potentially? What are some of the new trends and challenges? I mean, think about it. There's a lot of disruption going on right now in technology with things like AI and trying to embed AI into your business. What are some golden nuggets that you can leave cybersecurity teams so they can better navigate going into 2025? Cybersecurity integrated into M&A.
Look, I think the number one thing still is ensure that you know how to have a conversation that gets you the opportunity to be at the table. All right. If you're still producing reports that tell everyone how much spam you stopped, trust me, you're nowhere. Have a think about that stuff. There's a lot of articles around those things. You want to have the opportunity to take the conversation away from the technical to the business value. Because remember, quite often, cybersecurity and IT operations is seen as a cost center, not as an opportunity for growth. Whereas I talk about continually, this can be a value add to the organization if you do it well, particularly if you're selling solutions. So you want to be able to take the opportunity to mature that conversation, have those informal chats. So then when the time comes up, you may get pulled into the room. All right. But at least they might think about you. It depends on the size of the organization, of course. And you want to be talking around and learning things as well, sharing information, particularly if you think there's an M&A going on. Perhaps it's the time to share articles like mine with the boss higher up. Hey, I found this thing. Have you got, just in case we ever think about this.
So, Craig, it sounds like the security leader needs to be a business leader, not necessarily a technology leader. It's a novel concept. I think we've talked about that a little bit on this show.
Every once in a while.
Yes, it's the look. Cybersecurity is ultimately still a business problem, and if you want to really add value to your organization, you need to figure out kind of where you're going to add that value, because having that ongoing technical conversation isn't going to work. You need to be able to align that to the business, either the mission, the values, the business goals, all the stuff that everybody else is talking about. I'm telling you, as a day-to-day CISO and done this for a lot of companies, this really does matter. No one cares how many things you blocked at the firewall. They just don't. They just want to know that they haven't been breached and that you're on top of it. And this is how it fits into the business story.
Absolutely. Craig, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thanks, Matt, Jason, Ben. Later.
We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.